Hello, this is Mike Fish, and today we are doing lesson 9 of section 1 of our short-term rental training, and arguably maybe this should have been the first lesson. Uh, that being said, it's in here, so it's certainly important that this is understood and reach out if you have questions on it. But today we're really going to talk about, can you do a short-term rental there in the first place? You know, can you use your current property? If you're looking for a property, what areas can I be in? I get on average probably 3-4 calls a week, and people are amazed to find out how politically heated this is, how restricted certain areas are, and you've almost got to get a feel of where things are going in what direction in different areas. I got a call just yesterday. Someone called from Isle on Mille Lacs and wanted me to manage their property. First thing I said is, well, are you ADA compliant? And she said no, and there is no way her property could be ADA compliant. So currently, Mille Lacs will not give her a license. They implemented that in 2023, and they have not backed down on it. In fact, and if you're working with a realtor, you cannot just assume that the realtor understands these things or cares about these things. I know another property that happens to be on Mille Lacs that got sold this year as an active, successful short-term rental, and it was not ADA compliant. And they should have known that as soon as it was sold, the buyer was buying under false pretenses because they could not have a short-term rental there. So I've been involved in this since the very beginning as we were discussing the implementation of the original Crow Wing license. I will tell you that things have shifted. It's been handed back to a lot of the cities. I would get calls, from people who got a call once from someone who just bought $1 million plus place in Lakeshore, bought it for a short-term rental, called me to rent it, and I was the one that had to tell him he could only rent it 6 times a year. So it's really important that you reach out and you do your investigation about what the current rules are, as well as maybe get a feeling of if rules might change, because we've certainly seen that over the last few years. There's some places that I think are very safe, some places that are kind of spearheading, doing the right things to balance out the issues with what we do. I'll bring up Cross Lake is, to me, probably the future of where this is going across the board. Brainerd Baxter also have kind of taken on this issue for themselves. And of course, there's things that I think are great, about what some of the cities are doing, and things I disagree with. But it's important to understand if you're in Mille Lacs, you're in Mille Lacs or Aiken or Morrison or Cass. If you're in Crow Wing, the individual township might be doing the license and handling everything. So it's important you do your work before you buy a property, or before you get too involved in trying to develop your current property as a short-term rental. You need to make sure that you understand the licensing and the zoning, and we help people with that. I do intend to develop another resource on our website to help people kind of guide them. But the bottom line is you need to contact the city, get the information, read it yourself. I always have to say, of course, I'm not an attorney, right? So be very, very careful with what you're doing, but reach out if you do have questions. Some of these towns are very restrictive. We've got areas that only allow you to rent 6 times a year. We had areas that only allowed you to rent 4 times a year. And my argument has always been, what's the point of doing it, right? So I've been heavily involved in this for years, going to the town meetings, involved in the conversations. We've had wins, we've had losses, but it can be very, very heated and very political. Not everybody wants a rental next to them, and that's a whole other conversation. But it's very important for you to slow down and double check if you can even do a VRBO there, and what the licensing, what the restrictions are in that individual township or county. On that note, getting the state lodging permit is another issue for another video. Okay, You also want to double check kind of right up front, are there HOA, are there covenant rules? We run into this all the time. People call us saying, hey, I'd love to do a VRBO there. We pull up the covenants and go, no, they don't allow it. So that's another thing to consider. I mentioned this in another video, but it's important to understand, I would consider even the layout, if possible, get as much information as you can on the neighborhood. What is the climate there, right? Quite frankly, we have ways of dealing with neighbors that are unfairly hostile towards what we're doing, but we would love to always have happy neighbors. And 9 out of 10 of our neighbors are happy. There are several things we do to work with the neighbors and make sure they're comfortable. For example, I had a very angry neighbor follow up with me. I was very surprised very recently when I said, hey, have you reviewed my 5 pages of house rules? I'll send it to you. Let me know if you want to add to it. There are things we do to work with the neighbors, including, if the owners are on board, including saying, hey, by the way, friendly neighbor, if you have any friends or family come to the area, give us a call and we'll give you a huge discount for your friends and family to stay here when they're in town. So there's things we do to build up that relationship. It is also important because this is all part of the consideration when you're considering the license. It falls into the covenants and the rules and restrictions. One thing I want to emphasize in this conversation is the parking, the access to the parking, and the impact on the traffic. Not only for your reviews in the end and your guests being happy, but for the neighbors being happy, and in the end making sure that we're not dealing with complaints, or you're not dealing with complaints if you're self-managing. Very important to understand. We've got places here's pretty much across the board what the rules are. 1 car per vehicle, one vehicle, 1 vehicle per bedroom, no parking in a yard, and no parking on the street. And this is a massive issue for many of our guests. If you've got a 4-bedroom rental, you can have 4 vehicles. But you've got to take in consideration, is there parking for a boat trailer? Because if they don't have a place to put their boat trailer, that's an issue you're going to want to deal with up front. We can talk about that in a different conversation. But the last thing you want is them being forced to park on a road, to have your neighbors get frustrated and turn it into the city or the county, depending on where you're licensed. It's also important to understand the overall rules, when it comes to, noise. All of that is so important to understand, because you've got to play by the rules. As I say, and I would encourage you to take this attitude, we don't run party houses. And there's a lot of people that get into this and think they can throw it on Airbnb and not worry about it. And it's a numbers game. I always say 19 out of 20 of our guests are considerate, beautiful, respectful people. 1 out of 20 is a massive headache for me because they've got unrealistic expectations, and we're doing whatever we need to do to basically keep them happy. 1 out of 50 can be a problem. It's a numbers game. You might go a year without a problem. You may go 2 years. You won't go 3 years. And I am supportive of the city rules, like Cross Lake. I've always advocated for a 3 strikes and you're out, because we need to play by the rules. We need to make sure that we're not impeding on the quiet enjoyment of our neighbors, or this is not a long-term game, right? I've been doing this for 8 years now. This is a long-term game for me. There's properties I manage now that I'll hopefully be managing 15 years from now. I always say, for what it's worth, the community, the neighbors, they didn't choose to live next to a rental. We need to do things in a way that works for them too. Definitely a different conversation, but I'd like to give you a little bit of my thoughts on that when it comes to understanding why some of these townships are so restrictive. We don't want more of them to be more restrictive. And on that note, I always say this, for what it's worth too, and I get calls from a lot of people that are thinking about doing this, thinking about investing. Like any other investment, I always say, don't do it if you can't afford it. Meaning that, what if the STR regulations do change? What if something comes down the pike and you do get banned? What if you don't have any ice or snow and you have a really bad off season, right? So it's something to consider too. We are in a continually shifting political, scene in this area when it comes to short-term rentals. Again, I've been heavily involved in defending us and the advocacy of it, but it's very important as you look at these things that you're taking your time to look at places that are safe, because many people, and I've gotten many calls over the years, have bought a property to do a short-term rental and then found out that they couldn't. Or they couldn't do it to the extent that they needed to do it to hit their goals. So make sure you're checking those county, those city rules, any covenants in the area, and reaching out to me if you want us to answer your questions and do some legwork for you as well. But it's a costly mistake to not look up front right away into the licensing and the restrictions and the covenants of the property, because just assuming that you can do a short-term rental anywhere you want is simply not the case. Again, this is Mike Fish. Depending on where you're seeing this, please go ahead and subscribe, like the video, stay in touch. We hope that this content is valuable to you. We're going to be putting out a lot more. We're developing multiple trainings, and at this point I think all of it will be open to the public, completely free. So stay in touch. We would love to earn your trust and your business. Thank you.